Hello, hello. So we're getting people still shuffling in, but we have to get started on time because that's how we were supposed to do it. Yeah, we're good? All right, so we're going into this third and last panel before we move afterwards into the Shark Tank, which highly encourage all of you to stay. And this panel is called Creating Environments for Ongoing Radical Innovation in Healthcare, Energy, Transportation, and Finance. We had an intro early on, but now we get to hear some specialists in the area, and I'm very happy and honored to have some of the members in this panel that I've known for a very long time, and have the pleasure of working together. So first I'd like to call and invite Mort Taylor from Signal Power and Light, who's coming in from Alabama, and I've had the pleasure of working for, 10 years now. Luis Macias from GrainChain, who I just found out is also doing work in Honduras. I'm from Honduras, so I'm really happy to have him on. And Pedro López Sela from FrissOn Capital, who is also a really good friend of the university now, and hopefully even closer friend from now on. All right?
Thank you.
This panel will be moderated by Lyall from the Atlas Network. Hope you enjoy it.
Well, everyone, I'm grateful to have an opportunity to be with you today. We've got some great panelists, and I think we've got a chance to dig into some things. Innovation, I know we spent some time on AI, we spent some time on cryptocurrency, and I think sometimes when it comes to radical innovations, those happen in places that we may not think are hotbeds for innovation. And I think we've got some of that here. When we think about innovations that were critical to human flourishing, especially later, back in the day. Think about the washer and dryer. It's kind of a low-tech machine, but it had massive implications in terms of how it freed up human capital. And so the entrepreneurs and investors that we have here on the stage today are actively working in ways in which radical innovation is happening in a diverse range of sectors. And so we're going to spend some time on that. So I'm going to give each of them just a chance briefly to introduce yourself. And then we're going to jump into a couple of questions that we're going to start at kind of the high level and work our way down. So Mort, give a little bit of background and kind of what you do, what's your day job, and maybe one of the key things you're working to change the game from a radical innovation standpoint with your business.
Well, thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm the CEO of an energy company in the southern United States, which is called Signal Power and Light. The company's over 100 years old, started by my grandfather. I actually practiced law for a number of years, but when my father and my uncle both became deceased, I got pulled in to be the CEO. If anybody's ever worked with family members, you have my sympathy. I live with that every day. So there are three parts to the company. One part is we've heard a lot about technology where we can talk to whales and we can create human consciousness, but that's not what one part of my company is. We have trucks and bulldozers and shovels, and we have drills, and we dig in the ground and we extract oil and gas and coal, and we also generate power as well. So that's one part of the company. Another part of the company is dedicated to research and development and technology. We've worked on carbon water filtration, for instance, is one of the things we've worked on. We're just now starting to get into applications for hydrogen in producing energy. And then the third part is I'm part of a partnership that manages an economic free zone in Central America. So that's my background.
How you doing? My name is Luis Macias. I'm the CEO of GrainChain. We own a company that really is trying to level the playing field for the agricultural industry. We use blockchain technology in different parts of the world to create liquidity for farmers and to be able to not only have small and medium stage farmers have the same opportunities that some of the institutions that manage corn, coffee, we do milk and a lot of other products, but giving them the technological infrastructure to be able to compete in the market. We have over 24 different commodities that we work with around the world and over 20,000 participants on our system. But in essence, we're using technology to be able to get money to farmers faster, and enable them to be able to have the chance for productive liquidity. And when I say productive liquidity, there's a lot of lending in the industry that is extremely difficult and expensive. And with the use of the technology that we have, we're giving them the opportunity to access these funds. And we're giving them the opportunity to really take advantage of the market, eliminating a good part of the intermediaries that don't add value, while appreciating a lot of the intermediaries that add a lot of value. So we've been applying this type of technology for quite a few years now, and it's been extremely successful, especially in the Latin American market.
Great. Pedro.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. Pedro López Sela, born and raised in Mexico. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur for about 30 years. Presently, I'm managing partner of FrissOn Capital. There's a venture capital firm that invests in deep tech in the global south. And basically, half of my time is investing in entrepreneurs, and the other half of my time is helping the entrepreneurs. So most of the work that we do in that space is building deep tech ecosystems for the World Intellectual Property Organization in the global south.
Great. So we're going to maybe title this session the CEO Group Therapy Session, because our next question to them, really to start, we wanted to have part of this Radical Innovation Summit as a place where we can talk about policy, right? So there's places where if I want to know the future of Bitcoin, I can go to that conference. Here we wanted to talk about how do we create an environment culturally and from a public policy standpoint that allows innovation to thrive. So my first question to these CEOs, as we talked, is especially from a public policy standpoint, where are places where you're seeing public policy actually help and facilitate what you do? And where are you seeing that create really significant roadblocks that have, of course, implications for the well-being of farmers or, you know, energy sector or wherever else might be? So where are you seeing good things happen? And where are you know, what are maybe some of the key challenges right now that you're wrestling with as a CEO that some of the think tankers and others who are influencing those policymakers might want to have on their radar to spend some time working on, researching, and unleashing or unlocking or removing the roadblocks that are getting in your way now as entrepreneurs? Mort, why don't you want to kick us off?
I could talk a long time about, so let's talk, I'll talk about the energy sector. Some of the things that have been good, so, you know, sort of step back, big picture, if you want to have a healthy, thriving middle class, you need low-cost energy. For a person to get paid more, they have to be more productive. And for a person to be productive, all means of productivity require access to energy. And if you want to have a healthy democracy, you have to have a healthy middle class. So, you know, I think to have a healthy democracy and a healthy middle class, you need low-cost, affordable energy. So some of the things that have worked, that have been done pretty well. First of all, in energy production, allowing market forces that incentivize individual producers to produce so that there's competition for wholesale energy. That's something that is definitely helpful from a policy standpoint. And then to go along with that, transparency in contracts that provide wholesale energy through PPAs, which are called purchase power agreements, in addition to a spot market where there is daily competition from producers. That's from a policy standpoint. That has turned out to be a good thing. Market competition for transmission and distribution of power is a good thing. And then the final thing that I've seen, and some U.S. states have started to adopt this, which is competition for power consumers to be able to buy from specific producers. So that can come in two different forms. That can come through what are called qualified consumers, and these are larger consumers who can go out and buy power from specific producers, or even down on the retail level. Like, for instance, I'll give you an example in the U.S. If you are a resident of the state of Ohio in the United States, you can go to a website and you can buy power from whomever sells you the cheapest power that day. So like the same way that you pick the phone company that you buy your cellular phone service from, or you go to the grocery store and you buy your toothpaste, you can choose who sells you power, and that's done through a website with the state of Ohio. And the state of Texas has also looked at doing some things like that. So from a policy standpoint, on the energy side, I would say those are things that generally tend to bring the price of power down and also make power more ubiquitous and more available to more people, which only helps everyone. I mean, one of the things you see in countries where the price of power is high because it's not as available, wages come down. Because when the price of power is high, the only way the country can compete in producing products that they sell is to depress wages. So if you can lower the price of power through these market mechanisms, it's the best chance you have of raising wages for the workers within that country.
Luis, anything, maybe I'll give it to you to take the other side of that for the business you're in. Where are governments getting in the way of the kinds of innovation that you see could be possible, but right now your hands are tied or it's a really tough slog to try to make that innovation and that available to others that you're working on in your business?
So I'm at an interesting crossroad because I work in finance and I also work in agriculture. And most of the countries that we work in, agriculture is a big part of their GDP. Agriculture is something that needs to grow and is not growing. And it's a scenario that is very concerning for food security, but it's also very concerning for the overall governments, because how do we inspire young individuals to get into agriculture when it's very hard to borrow money? It's very hard to work and do things that you do. We're seeing a big shift in Central America where a lot of the youth of those countries are migrating to the United States and they're leaving a lot of the agriculture work to the older community. So that becomes a very interesting situation because you have governments who are saying, we are willing to do anything to empower our farmers, and we need to do things, to the point where they're subsidizing the cost of funds, to the point where they're trying to figure it out. But then how do you do that and ensure that they continue and grow? And then you're on the finance side. And the finance side it's highly regulated, and it is extremely, especially when you start looking into, you'll see it in the United States too, but they're very adverse to something new. So when we walk into a place and say, we've got this new technology that's going to help digitize the process of farming, and it's also using blockchain technology. Let's go ahead and stop. You just said the word. We don't want to hear the word. And that was 5 years ago. 5 years ago, we would walk into a bank, into their board of directors and say, we're using blockchain technology to ensure that the distribution of funds goes to the right people, to ensure that settlements are done properly. We're using smart contracts to ensure that banks are getting paid when the farmers get paid, and that the farmers are getting paid the right amounts. And I would say 5 years ago, it was a very difficult conversation to have, because the first thing they said is, we're not going to pay people in Bitcoin. And we have developed very, very effective mechanisms to work with traditional banking systems to transfer assets and to be able to distribute funds in an effective manner. But you also get into a situation where the regulations don't let themselves walk, in the sense that it's very difficult to get a bank account because of a lot of the anti-money laundering and regulations in countries like Mexico and other countries. The banks still need to go to your home and check that you actually live there to open a bank account. And in the last couple of years, things have changed dramatically. There's been two things that have affected our business. There is an absolute necessity to get, COVID was a huge factor in this, where we needed to figure out how to get money to farmers without the farmers having to be able to go to the bank, without people having to be able to go to people's houses to check that they're really them to give them accounts. So we've seen a massive shift in the last couple of years, creating basic bank accounts for farmers that allow us to transact, to allow us to pay them. And you've seen a lot of policy shift in a lot of central banks saying, what can we do to enable this? And our technology has been one of those tools where you can identify that this farmer really has their product. You can identify where their farm's at. You start digitizing the process. You start giving them a history of their work, of their production, and you start taking away a lot of those fears that we cannot create a digital bank account and we cannot bank this person. And so we've worked hard in Central America and Mexico and South America to be able to bank people that traditionally couldn't be banked. And we're seeing that the regulation is getting a lot more progressive. There's still a lot of work to do. There's countries where the biggest benefit to tech companies, small tech companies, is they're building these sandboxes. And they're saying, you know what, start your project here. We're going to limit you at this amount of money, of transfer capability. And if you can prove that Tom Jones or Juan Valdez is actually getting the money, then we're going to expand your sandbox. And the sandbox concept has been really effective in Latin American countries. And I think that's the biggest push that we need to keep pushing for innovators to be able to do things like this. Because if you tell an innovator, okay, we'll give you the ability to have an effective money transfer system, but you need to invest $3 million in a bank charter and go through a 3-year process, it's just going to be impossible. But the big policy pushes on these sandboxes, and you're seeing a lot of the different governments come back and say, this has been successful, let's expand these programs and let's make these into real programs. So you're seeing that in countries like Mexico, where they've built sandboxes for companies like us. You've seen that in Central America. El Salvador is a great place, but even in countries like Honduras, where we're working, the banks are opening up and saying, we need to create digital bank accounts for people that can't drive 3 hours to a bank branch and open a bank account. And we need to be able to do this effectively. And with today's technology, we can ensure that it's the person that's getting into it. We're starting to bank a lot of people that traditionally not only were unbanked, but didn't trust banks. And we're starting to say, hey, we can provide you liquidity if you give us some transparency on your business. And they want to do it, and they want to get into it. So I think the biggest policy for innovators, for people like us who want to start something and plow new ground, because what we've done over the last many years is plow new ground, is talking to the policymakers about giving those sandboxes and those opportunities to be able to prove yourself. Because sandboxes can bring in bad actors, but you can limit them, and you can put them in a place to where you can say, you know what, you're out. But you don't want to stifle that growth. When I walk into a bank and say this is based off blockchain technology today, they're like, okay, let me get the lawyers in here. Let's see how this looks, and then you move forward. But we're in a completely different world 5 years ago than we are today.
I'll give you a quick response because I want to get to Pedro here.
I have a request to all the public policy people that are here today. I'm going to make a request. In any license or permit that a business pursues, as a policy standpoint, there is a presumption of yes. You are presumed that your license or permit is granted, okay? It's presumed that it's granted unless we tell you no, and there's a deadline for the damn bureaucrat to give me an answer. No, I mean, one of the biggest issues is a governmental entity, they won't tell you no, but they won't tell you yes. And you just sit on your damn hands waiting on some bureaucrat who's got no vested interest in what you're doing to ever give you an answer, and you're stuck, and you get stuck for years. Years waiting on the bureaucrat just to give you an answer. So from a public policy standpoint, there's a presumption of yes. We're not going to assume that you are a bad actor. We're going to presume that you're a good actor unless we tell you no. So you can file a permit. We, the bureaucrat, we have so many days or so many, give them time. We have so much time to review it, But if we don't give you an answer by such and such a date, you may commence your business operation. So just, can I make that request?
All right, it's Christmas come early, hopefully, for Mort here. All right. Pedro, let me give you a chance here. Where have you seen, you know, either in the good or the bad, where governments have really helped facilitate, you know, in terms of the sandbox concept that we've seen both in the States now and working its way around the globe, or ways that they're really getting in the way? And do you have a wish list too that you want to add to the folks in the room of, hey, go start working on this?
Sure. Let me give a good and a bad example.
Great.
I'd like to see a show of hands of people in the room that have eaten a 3D printed steak. Anybody? 3D printed steak, meat. So here's the story. I was invited to be part of a task force. This is back in the 90s. We were working for the World Intellectual Property Organization and the UN Environment Program working on transgenics. And we arrived at a southern country, Global South, and we started helping them do the biosafety regulation. This is probably back in 96 or something like that. The process that took us about 2 years to create the legislation was stopped about 4 months because one of the deputies received an email from a nephew that said that Kentucky Fried Chicken was printing chicken. So those were not chickens, that was printed thing. And it took us 4 months to tell them it is not viable. You cannot print anything at the moment except a piece of paper. So ignorance is a huge blocker for public policy, because you have a lot of people that have a lot of power discussing very stupid things, and then you get intelligent people in the room and the conversation is very bizarre. So please go to school or get advisors. Now the good one, and it's similar to what Luis was saying, I've been in conversations with groups that are pushing a lot for economic free zones. And there was a group of a certain country that is pushing a lot for that in other geographies around the world. And this is what caught my eye. The experience that they've had, especially creating places where you can play with fintech solutions, was very interesting to me. What they do is basically get the stakeholders of the country in the same room, and then they bring in the experts, and they push for economic free zones all the way to the most liberal thing you can think of. And they give examples and reasons why that should happen. And they already have the strategy before they begin implementing it. So what usually happens is that the politician gets scared. I work a lot in the health space, so also novelty is the worst word you can use, because you need regulation and processes in order to get things approved, because you're playing with human lives, right? So what usually happens is that the politician is going to give you a pushback saying, we want innovation, but economic free zones, tax and all that stuff, and taking out regulation of sanitary conditions is too risky. So usually what happens is that the pendulum comes back, and there's an agreement in a sandbox, which is what you actually wanted in the first place. And it has to do with bravery. That would be probably the other important Brazil. Latin America represents 10% of the population of the world, and we didn't have a biosafety level 4 lab before, like a week ago, that was announced in Brazil. And the reason for that is that we were scared to do research on that. So those labs are in Asia, North America, Europe, everywhere except Latin America. So it's a bit about being brave and knowing the boundaries of the politician. They're paid to say no, I think.
Sometimes they say yes, man. Depends on the situation. Great. So let me I want to give some time for questions here and make sure we've got adequate time for that. So we'll end with one final question. Just briefly, you know, a couple lessons learned as you've gone through this process. Obviously, as you run into these barriers, when it comes to your ability to influence and help them get to a yes, what are things that you found in this space? You mentioned a couple, avoid the word novelty, but are there a couple other lessons learned as you've gone about this to try to free your company or your industry or where you're going to be more open to innovation and allow you to experiment and thrive and do even more of what you're doing? What would be one or two things? Maybe, Luis, we'll start with you and kind of work back and end with Mort. A couple of lessons learned that might be valuable for the folks either as entrepreneurs or just in general enthusiasts around innovation to keep them from maybe making a mistake that you've made or learned a critical lesson that's helped you be successful.
I'll give the first one, and I'll give two after that because this one's going to be the best one, is patience and persistence. You're gonna go into a scenario where if you're bringing in something new, there's not going to be a lot of understanding. And patience and persistence is the thing that has got us through most of where we have been. You know, we've walked into offices where we haven't gotten answers back for 3 years. And the patience part is don't give up, because there's always a way. And especially if you have a great idea and you're going to implement that idea and you know where it's going to go. But persistence is probably the best tool that you're going to use. And persistence is bringing in knowledgeable people, finding local actors that believe in what you do. And I say this because we go into different countries and there are like-minded people. There are people that want to enhance the standard of living, bring in innovation, do more. And you're going to find that bravery in finding somebody local who's willing to work with you and push this is going to be your way in. With that comes a lot of research and knowledge. We've invested way too much money on lawyers. Sorry about that. I'm not a huge fan of them. In the sense that you have to make that investment, because if you don't have the answers for them, they're not going to look for them. Because most of the time you're talking to politicians, you're talking to bureaucrats, you're talking to people whose experience is, this is risky, how is it going to get me elected? Or how is it going to affect me in the future term? And when you invest in research and when you bring in good local legal counsel who understands how to get things done is going to be your key. And that has a lot to do with persistence, because you're going to find a lot of naysayers in everything you do. If you are doing something radical, and if you are doing something innovative, you're going to get a lot more no's than you're going to get yeses. And as times go through, you're going to find that you're going to have to find that local representative, that local lawyer, that local person in the community who says, we do need to do this, we need to help you. So we have found a lot of success by finding local stakeholders, either in politics or in finance. We try to stay away from government, but we do talk to them and get them to buy in to why we need that innovation.
Great. Pedro.
Yeah. I would say three things, and in a very specific order. Ingenuity, grit, and gratitude. You need to find the loopholes. Being an entrepreneur and being an innovator, you have to search. And it's going to take you a long time, and you have to talk to the right people. And here's the catch. If you go to Global South, to a country that does not have a mature regulatory system, it might be easier. And people don't understand that at first. They think that they have to go to the Max Planck Institute because those guys are doing state-of-the-art. But if you go to the Católica de Chile, for example, you have probably the same lab. You have a guy that studied in Oxford, but you do not have the regulatory process that you have in Germany. So there might be an opportunity. So find the loopholes. Grit, I couldn't agree more. This is a marathon or an Ironman. It takes a while, and you have to train for it, and you can never give up. But then finally, gratitude, because if you want to do something, you have to be aware that you're going to be asking favors from a lot of people. If you find an entrepreneur that says that they're so bright that they made it on their own, they're lying or they're stupid, because you need a village to do something actually. So gratitude is going to be super important in the process.
Great. Mort, final remarks here, 60 seconds, and then we'll get to some Q&A.
I'll tell my own horror stories. I mean, things always cost more and take longer than you think. That's been my experience. Entrepreneurs are optimists. I mean, we're optimistic. We're dreamers. We think of things and we try new things. There was actually a study done about a decade ago, and the result was called the optimist paradox. And what they did was they took people who were more psychologically oriented to be cynical and pessimists, and they took people who were more psychologically oriented to be optimists, and they showed the people a picture, and then they took the picture away and they asked them to describe what was in the picture. Cynics were much more accurate in describing what was in the picture. If you're a pessimistic person, you see the picture more accurately. Okay? Now, they then gave those same people difficult tasks to perform. And the optimists cleaned the cynic's clock. They were much better at performing a difficult task because they didn't quit. So there's something about being an optimist that makes you somewhat psychologically self-deceptive to where you don't quite see the truth in what you're getting yourself into, but it also gives you perseverance to see it through, whereas the cynic or the pessimist will quit. So if somehow you can find that Zen-like middle ground between the optimistic side and the pessimistic side and can bring both of those to bear, but yet keep enough of your optimism to get you through the very difficult times you're going to go through. And like I said, remember the rule of Mort, which is it's always going to cost more than you think and take longer than you think. But if you can get through it, that's the psychology of it. So.
Wonderful. Well, let's give a round of applause to our great entrepreneurs up here. Thank you. We've got about 9 minutes for some questions. So if you do have a question, I'll just invite you. Please get the question as quickly as possible so we allow them to answer. So some questions from the audience for our folks up here. First one, maybe here. Yeah.
When I think about radical technologies that have been on the front page of the paper over the last decade, they include things like the Internet of Things, blockchain technology, machine learning, artificial intelligence, Gen AI, and the list goes on and on. How do you, as people running businesses, keep abreast of the latest innovations? And then second, how do you decide which ones will be relevant to your business?
All right. Pedro wants to go first.
I love the question. I'm a super geek. So for those who don't know, we have right now more than 30 technologies that are known as exponential technologies, meaning that they double the capacity in a very short time. One of those technologies, for example, was the printer or the production line. So having 30 at the same time is crazy. This is a fantastic time to live in. What I do is have a lot of friends that are a lot smarter than I am and talk to them regularly. That's the only way that you can do it, I think. I do read a lot, and I try to keep up the pace with podcasts and articles and all that stuff. But I have a massive community of people that just, I guess, find funny that I'm calling them all the time to ask them about the next big thing. And they help me filter all the info.
I think I pride myself on the saying, if I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room. I think we've always focused on staying on top of understanding solutions, right? Technologies are wonderful, but how do they solve our problems? And we focus a part of every session of what we're going to do for the next 10 weeks on innovative meetings with the different stakeholders that we have in saying, what are the biggest problems? And I think there's a new technology that's going to help us with these problems. If I build something that works today, I'm in a world of technology. I'm not sure it's going to work tomorrow as well as the new technologies coming up. So we pride ourselves on the fact that I know that the systems that I deployed 5 years ago have nothing to do with the systems I deployed today. And I have the people who we challenge on a day-to-day basis on our team who ensure that if there is a better way to do it, we're not scared to test it and see it. But we have to make it a solution, not a very pretty title on what we're delivering.
I just speak for myself. A lot of that comes in your hiring process and your recruitment. You really need to recruit creative, heterodox people, particularly in your management. One of the things we've done is we do give a questionnaire as a screening process, and the questions are sort of stealth questions that don't seem like they mean anything. But we plot a grid. And if you can imagine a grid where on the x-axis it's individualist thinking versus more group thinking, and on the y-axis it's risk aversion versus risk tolerance. We try to identify individualists who are risk tolerant through the questionnaire that we use. And that's turned out to be a pretty good screening that we'll do for management. And then we have a pretty lengthy interview process that we go through, and we really try to identify that. Because when, especially on the R&D side, when we start getting into new things, we really have to have people who can shift and get out of their comfort zone and really we have to have people who are comfortable with that. And there are people who just psychologically aren't comfortable with that. And so that's been a big thing that we've tried to hone that down and work on.
Interesting. Maybe a question from this side of the room? I see a hand. No? Maybe back over here. Any other? I'm kind of blinded, so I'm going to, the lights. We have one more? Maybe right up at the top. It looks like the microphone's working its way.
Yes. John Burlaw of the Competitive Enterprise Institute, member of the Brain Trust here, and just fascinated with this panel. But one thing in particular I wanted to comment on and get any reaction about optimists and pessimists from Mort. Our founder and chairman emeritus of the Competitive Enterprise Institute, who many of you know, Fred Smith, would always call himself a despairing optimist. In other words, he would look, in good times, he would look for that dark cloud, sort of to be prepared for it. And then in bad times, he would look for the ray of sunshine. And I'm just wondering, and anyone else can answer, do you think that is sort of a balance for how to be sort of a realist, yet, to have hope?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, and you need a good support system around you too. You need friends who love you and friends who will speak the truth to you. And I'd say that's another part of it as well.
I think every entrepreneur is a despairing optimist, because when things are going well, there's something around the corner.
Well, good. Once again, give me a round of applause to our panelists. And thank you for your questions and being here. Guillermo?
Thank you very much. That was wonderful and entertaining. So right now we're going on a break. We'll have a break until 3. We're going to start at 3 sharp English time. We have our judges here for the Shark Tank. Everything I think is ready. Our contestants are ready. So lunch break now. Enjoy your meal. Tenemos un descanso ahora hasta a las 3. Empezamos en puntito, sin un minuto de atraso para el Shark Tank.